Okay, so a new research report, I think it was Durham University and yourselves, Wave, conducted it, and it looking at water scarcity relating to decarbonisation projects. Be good to understand sort of how the research came about. What was the trigger for the work to be undertaken?
Yeah, it's a fair question. How did we start this whole journey? I think it was probably about 3 years ago, and we were thinking about the price review periods that apply to the water industry. So PR 24 was on its way, price review 24 was on its way, and we were thinking about some of our very large customers. And so we were thinking the challenges that they have, and it was, I guess, a bit of the strategy around putting the customer at the centre of what we do. That might sound a little bit cheesy, but it's exactly what we did. And we realised that these customers had fairly significant challenges around decarbonisation. So at that time, decarbonisation projects were being discussed around carbon capture, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen. And blue hydrogen is generating hydrogen from fossil fuels, and green hydrogen is generating hydrogen from water. So very, very different. And so we've sort of recognised there are five big industrial clusters around England. You've got the Humberside, the South Humberside cluster, which, we have some of our very large customers there. There's the Northwest, there's the Black Country, there's the Solent, and then there's also the Teesside cluster. So we actually thought, you know what, all of these clusters are going to have challenges. And so we thought, actually, why not understand the detail of those projects, these decarbonisation projects, but at the same time have a real deep dive into the water resource management plans? Because as part of the price review cycles, water companies have to produce a water resource management plan, and that plan should indicate and detail all the water resources they need to fulfill their obligations in terms of water supply to household. Now, it is quite interesting in that there isn't necessarily the same statutory obligation for water companies to provide water to industry. And so we were worried that they were not going to include the right amount of water for these decarbonisation plans.
Okay, and as a result of the work, you have, I think, the main finding from the report is that the water required for these decarbonisation projects is going to push some of the potentially, I guess, some of the reasons you mentioned, but several UK regions into deficit, and as early as 2030, which in terms of building infrastructure and all that stuff isn't very far away at all.
No, it's not. It's literally 5 years, isn't it? Yes. So the main headline of the report basically highlighted that in parts of the Anglian region, and typically around the South Humber cluster, they'll be in deficit by 2030, but there'll be 130 megalitre deficit by 2050 if nothing is done. So this really really shines a light on the importance of planning and working together to make sure the water resources are there. And there's a massive link between water and energy. So this isn't just about decarbonising and taking CO2 out of the emissions and obviously mitigating climate change. This is about energy security as well. And this is the real strong link between water and energy. And
And
so
yeah.
so the report also found that there's going to be a less likely deficit in Yorkshire, but certainly in the United Utilities region, there will be a deficit by 2030 of around 70 megalitres per day. But again, the water resource management plans that United Utilities have in place should mitigate that by 2045. So there are real issues of not being able to support and deliver our decarbonisation plans because of water shortages.
Yeah, and I guess it'd be good to understand why is so much water required for decarbonisation projects. What's going on? Where is it used?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's sort of three sort of decarbonisation types of projects. I'll start with carbon capture. And carbon capture is really removing CO2 from emissions. And to do that, they have to do lots of cooling. They have to heat lots of water, generate steam. And actually, it's the volume of water they required for those processes to allow the carbon capture to take place. And actually, water is used as a carrier medium for the CO2 when they inject it into the ground out to sea. And so just to give you a sense, it's a bit like if you ever did O levels, GCSEs in chemistry, and you did that little project where you're trying to use electrolysis to generate oxygen and hydrogen. It's just like that. And what you actually need is, so for carbon capture, you need something like 2 to 5 litres of water per kilogram of carbon dioxide that you're going to capture. So, and obviously a litre is a kilogram. So it's 2 to 5 times the volume of water you need to capture that 1 kilogram of carbon. And then similarly for blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, for blue hydrogen, you need something like 22 litres to 55 litres of water to capture that, to generate that 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And for green hydrogen, it's about 17 to 47 litres that you require to capture and to generate that 1 kilogram of hydrogen. So the volumes of water you need are really, really huge. And why do you need that? It's cooling, it's heating. But for generating hydrogen, you need ultra pure water. And you also need, in doing that, you're actually generating waste as well. And so there's a significant volume you need to generate hydrogen or to capture carbon dioxide. And that's the problem that we have.
Okay, so in terms of the findings, then there's this need for significantly more water by 2050 for all this industrial carbonisation, and also, as you've touched on, perhaps, the industry in those areas, Humberside, Northwest Teesside, and I think Black Country, are going to impact on Anglian, maybe not, you said so much Yorkshire, UU, Northumberland, Severn Trent. So, how big is the problem potentially if the water companies don't sort of understand what's required?
Just to be clear, so the Black Country cluster, there probably won't be any issues. So in the Severn Trent region, they won't have a deficit. The main areas of deficit are the Anglian region and the Northwest region, so United Utilities. So they're the main areas. The other areas have been able to mitigate. But of course, if we did nothing by 2050, there's something like 850 megalitres per day required for decarbonisation. And our biggest concerns are the sort of the Anglian region and also the Northwest. And that's just taken into consideration of the decarbonisation projects we know of today and not future ones potentially.
Okay, and so if I understand correctly, by 2050, because obviously on the domestic waterfront, people are already predicting, I won't say Armageddon, but a not great future if nothing's done by 2050. So putting that together with what you're saying, by 2050, there's a sort of double whammy. There'll be this domestic shortfall that's already being talked about, and then this decarbonisation-led sort of industrial water challenge. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we already know, and there are already examples in Cambridge, for example, where housing developments and commercial developments are actually being stopped, are being prevented because of the shortage of water. We also know in the Essex and Suffolk region, there's planning embargoes because of the shortage of water. And so today we have those challenges for sort of domestic and sort of some commercial development, but overlay the decarbonisation demand, it does generate that double whammy as you described, yeah.
And in terms of addressing the challenges specifically around the decarbonisation water requirements, I'm guessing, as with a lot of the water industry challenge, collaboration is important, and we're looking again perhaps for a government to take a lead or come up with a strategy which then all the other stakeholders potentially sign up to. Just your thoughts as to how easy that is to achieve.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, in understanding how it's been a little bit, I think our assessment is government hasn't been leading it, and the regulators, the DEFRA, Ofwat, DESNZ haven't been leading this at all. And we have direct experience of this. So one of the things we did, we talked to all of the energy industries in the South Humber Bank to understand their water demands going forward, and the water demands specifically for these decarbonisation projects. And actually, we took a leading role in bringing them together, presenting them to Ofwat, making sure that the water wholesaler understood the demand and the requirements. And at that time, Anglian Water didn't have any other provision in their water resource management plan for their needs, for these decarbonisation demands. And so what we did in bringing people together, we pulled in Ofwat, we pulled in DESNZ, we were very fortunate because if we hadn't have done that, Anglian Water would not have been able to have the support to include the development of a desalination plant. And the whole idea of that desalination plant is it will generate roughly 60 megalitres per day, which will actually support some of the challenges. So that collaboration that we sort of facilitated, if you like, has to happen everywhere. And our worry is that it's not. And what we do need is government to make a proper lead, pull partners together, and these industrialists that are going to help us with energy security as well as decarbonising.
And I guess in fairness to the water companies, obviously they have a role to play, but perhaps as the report I think recommends, it's the more of the responsibility lies with the decarbonisation project managers to engage with the water companies to sort of explain what they're doing and what their requirements are. Is that the right way around?
Yeah, it is. I think there has been an expectation that these projects, these decarbonisation projects, would sort themselves out. But there's a reality that they can't because it's very, very complex. They can't just take water. There's all sorts of other demands for that water, and clearly the right party to sort of to look at that and manage that is the water company. And as I've said earlier, the water companies don't necessarily have the same statutory obligation to industry as they do to households. So hence they haven't necessarily taken into consideration these decarbonisation projects' demands. But yes, the projects do have to sort of be more vocal, but equally a government need to pull parties together and actually lead it, because fundamentally this is about energy security. Yes, it's about climate change and mitigating climate change, but it's also energy security.
And in terms of other recommendations in the report, I think there is a suggestion that decarbonisation project managers should also explore ways to minimise water use. So I guess a lot of the technologies they're looking at are fairly new, but they have the opportunity to sort of improve their water efficiency, if you like. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're seeing now, we're starting to see innovative tariffs deployed by water companies that actually, if you're not evidencing as an industrialist that you're water efficient, you will have to pay more money. It's going to cost you more for your water. So I think I'd also say that industry has always been focused on cost and focused on efficiency. But I think there are these new tariffs coming out that are actually going to really shine a light on the need to be more water efficient, because of course if you want to have even more water and apply for even more water, you have to evidence your operation is already water efficient. So that's quite interesting. I think the other thing is that a lot of these technologies that generate the hydrogen or even sort of capture the carbon, that technology is developing all the time, and so to sort of reduce the specific water intensity factor, I was talking about, the magnitude 20 to 50 times the volume of water you need for the kilogram of hydrogen. If we can actually, through innovation, generate hydrogen using less water, well, clearly that's also important. So those project managers have also got that challenge as well. And the other big problem that we have is, so for example, I talked about the desalination plant that Anglian Water have in their current plans. So to actually design, to sort of build, to get the planning, to commission a desalination plant of that size is going to take between 10 and 15 years. So we're still in 2025. We've got challenges of these projects coming along in 2030, 2035. Well, we're not going to have that additional water stream available for 10 to 15 years potentially. And so what we also need to be doing is thinking about reuse. So how can we reuse water? Where can we reuse water? What quality of water do we need for these various projects that we've discussed?
It also occurs to me, I mean, I do some work in the data center industry, and I'm just wondering, because clearly they're, AI and there's a massive explosion there. Have you done any work, or just anecdotally, any idea as to how much more water these guys are going to require if all these data centers, to host AI applications? Is that adding to the problem, or?
Inevitably, that demand will add to the problem. It depends the area of that demand. So I think a lot of when we've looked at data centers, a lot of those data centers are unsurprisingly in the south. Yeah, but we also know there are some large ones around Teesside. And in Teesside area is not so much of a problem because Northumbrian Water have the killed a reservoir, which
It's
took
a
a
reservoir. Yeah.
huge volume of water. Obviously, that was built for the Industrial Revolution of the 1850s, so they don't have a problem with water, so that's not an issue. A lot of these data centers have closed loop systems, so their cooling is closed loop, but you've got to fill it up to start off with. So the challenge is, what quality of water do you need for that system? Are those systems, do they require a continuous flow of water? And I guess we're trying to understand that, but my understanding at this point in time, a lot of those would be sort of closed loop systems, so they're not constantly needing a requirement of water. But we're still looking at that, to be honest.
And I guess whether that is an issue. In any case, the decarbonisation project managers and the regional water companies, with your report recommendation, is that they look at creating regional water hubs. So what would those look like, if you like, and what does each party bring to it?
So I think there's a reality that these decarbonisation projects, and you talked about data centres, they probably need water of different qualities. They don't necessarily need drinking quality water. Some of them will need ultra pure water that's demineralized, so they'll have to go through different processes. Some of them could accept a lower standard of water. So I guess if you've got water in a particular region for these clusters, understanding who needs what where is an important part of that, and then working together as a regional cluster to sort of develop the need of what's required. So that collaboration piece, that working together, is going to be really important to understand that, and then to deliver a sort of a combined solution to it. But the industrialists can't work in isolation. They've got to work with other industrialists, and then they've got to work with water companies, and then also they've got to work with the regulators to ensure that this is a success.
And I think the report also raises, I won't say, well, raises the spectre of a water grid. I know it's been talked about a lot in the past, and with the private water companies, there's maybe not the incentive to cooperate to that extent. But I think you're suggesting, obviously, that the idea of moving water from, oversupply to where it's less plentiful needs revisiting or taking seriously, because I say it's been looked at before, but
I think so. Water companies, depending on how their boundaries fit against and how their networks work, there already are some sharing arrangements between Yorkshire Water and Severn Trent, for example. They sort of share key reservoirs that are sort of in between their two regions. One of the bigger challenges we have is that moving water, pumping water, is really expensive, and so that's the big challenge. So I think it is a need to have a look at how we develop our water resources, where those resources are taken from, and the ability to share those wherever possible, but just accepting that it's very expensive to pump water if you're wanting to pump it from one end of the country to the other end of the country.
And if this is a silly question, apology, but is there any scope for taking the decarbonisation projects to where the water resources are more plentiful, or is that not possible, because that's not where the carbon's generated? So
it's quite interesting. So the majority, so Humberside, Northwest, Teesside, and Solent, they're on coastal areas. So obviously there's an abundance of water from the sea, but of course there are complications in treating that water if you're going to desalinate it. There's a huge cost. The energy costs are quite significant. But of course, you've got one of the clusters in the Black Country, which isn't coastal. So yes, that has to be considered. But I think there's already, the energy industries are there in the regions they're in already for a reason. But I think the biggest thing, as I've said, really, with water reuse. So rather than just discharging into the sea, discharging into a water course, what about reusing that water? What about the water from municipal wastes? So sewage treatment plants, can that final effluent be used? Can it be treated to a sufficient standard that it meets the requirements of these industrialists? So all of those things need to be considered.
Okay, and I think the final sort of suggestion is that the water companies just need to be a bit more, my words, not yours, but savvy in terms of sort of real-time understanding of what's going on, so they can manage that water demand. I guess at the moment I think you explained, they possibly aren't fully aware of what's coming down the line, so they need to get a bit smarter.
Yeah, I mean, the water companies do an amazing job, and their statutory obligations are around the provision to households domestic water, which they do. I think there's a broader piece that's required by the regulator to perhaps support water companies to do what they need to do to support the industrialists that have these decarbonisation projects. And I think that's the piece that's been missing. Now, through working with Anglian, the industrialists on the Southumber Bank, we managed to support and make the case to support the water company to have some investment to develop the feasibility for this desalination plant. But that took a lot of coordination, and I think it's government need to take the lead in making sure that water companies are properly supported and industrialists are properly supported to meet the government objectives of net zero.
Maybe just finally, be good to understand Wave's role. I mean, you've explained there, I think, obviously about a project. Is that where you think you've got a role to play in sort of bringing various stakeholders together and helping projects?
Yeah.
Or just what you think you can help
Yeah,
out?
so in 2017, the market was changed such that for business customers, they have to buy water through a retailer, and Wave is a water retailer. And the purpose of that was to improve customer service, to improve the customer voice, if you like, not just to sort of improve billing, to provide innovation, to support in water efficiency, which Wave do all of those things. But I think that it's really that role of the retailer to support customers, and that's exactly what we've been doing. Because one, it's a benefit to us because hopefully the customers will stay with us, so they'll stay with us on commercial contracts. But equally for us, if we are supporting them and these industrial communities talk, hopefully we've got opportunities outside of the areas that we operate at the moment. So clearly in the Northwest or in the Solent or in the Black Country. So for us, it's an important piece looking after our existing customers, but also as eyes up as well. What else can we do for other customers?
And I suppose just finally, obviously you produced the research report. What's your hope or expectation? I mean, are you sort of sending it to key folks and following up and trying to generate sort of interest and some kind of strategy, or have you just put it out there and wait and see what happens? How proactive are you being, I suppose?
Yeah, we've been working on this for a while. So we've done a number of keynote speeches across key forums. So there's a forum called the Major Energy User Council. There are a number of industry user groups. So there's a Northeast Process Cluster. There's Catch, which is another user group, and there's the Humber Energy Board. So we've been sort of talking to them, obviously, as part of doing that, engaging very closely with water companies, so Northumbrian Water and also with Anglian Water, because we want this to be all a great success. Yeah, and our role is making sure that our customers are happy and are listened to. And so so this is just part of that process. We are considering what further research we could do, and there's some interesting opportunities here. As I've said, I think over the next few years we've got to fill the gap. So if these water streams are not coming on board for another 10, 15 years, what's going to happen? How are we going to support our customers? So that's an interesting area for us. And this research has actually led us to that, and we wouldn't have got here without that. And the relationship with Durham University is excellent. And we went through, as you do, a tender process to find the right partner. And we very quickly found the right partner with Simon Matthias and his team at Durham University. So I think, there's more to come from us. Yeah.
Okay, it's been fantastic to chat, and thank you so much for explaining the topic to us and the potential implications from not doing the right things and hopefully what will be happening. So Nigel, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your time as well, Philip.